Entanglement is something that happens in relationships where there is emotional messiness, fear of leaving the relationship, even though it's constantly on your mind, and one or both people are trying to justify things that more or less push the relationship over the edge to where it can no longer be saved. And if you can't face that, you just might be entangled. Now, entanglement tends to go in circles. It's an attachment that's more driven by desperation than commitment. So it tends to drive both people just crazy. And because it's so common in relationships where people were traumatized as kids, we're going to talk about it right now. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Marla, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I was emotionally abused for more than 20 years by my alcoholic spouse, who's been in recovery almost a decade now." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to go in and circle things that I want to go back to on a second reading, but let's go through and see what's happening in Marla's life. She says, 2 years ago, I had an affair. Now, my husband has truly changed and is changing, and I'm doing serious recovery work for codependency. He wants to heal our marriage. Are there any subtle forms of control in all of this? Am I wrong for not being more grateful or wanting this after all I've been through and how it has altered me? I was shattered, she says. I was a shattered, broken person who fell in love with someone else and finally saw glimpses of what it might be like to be happy again and loved in a normal way. From what I've learned, the state of what I was in was a sort of end-stage codependency. I couldn't live with the lie of the affair, and I knew my husband would likely find out. These things are hard to hide from the savvy. I decided to tell him a few months after. He is extremely grateful he heard it from me. I had fallen out of love and was crushed beyond belief by this time, having raised 2 children through it all. He had been doing some transformational work in the couple of years leading up to the affair, and I could see him admitting and realizing things about himself he'd not have been remotely able to years before, especially when he was still drinking. Since I revealed the affair, my husband has put the pedal to the metal on changing, listening, growing. He is never loud or insulting or verbally abusive anymore. He admits what he did and the role his abuse played in my destruction. He forgives me for the affair, and he wants to heal our marriage. He tried to, quote, date me again just after the affair was revealed, holding my hand, etc. I didn't understand. He says he's never not loved me and that all of the brokenness of his childhood, she puts #truthbomb, alcoholic family system from which I also come, taught him his ways of behavior, but he was so resistant to getting help in all the prior years, and he projected all of that onto me. I don't know what to do. We've been to couples therapy, listened to each other, and even the very hard stuff, served as each other's counselors. Not a great idea, I realize. But something is off. He's obsessed with anger over what my affair partner did to him. He is not mad at me, she puts quotes. He is supportive and loving of me, but I'm very hesitant to be intimate. I don't want to go back into, quote, prison, and I'm not in love. I just think I've been through too much. And the good girl in me feels guilty for not wanting to give my husband a chance. I'm stuck. I'm glad to see in searching that there is some positive information out there that doesn't always villainize the abuser, who, when they really want to change from within themselves, deserves to be able to change. But I'm afraid I, though holding my boundaries, I think very well, am caught up in a codependent situation where I feel guilty for all the work he's doing to hang on to me when I don't think I want it. But he won't really let me go either. He gets upset about how he isn't fed in this relationship, which he deep down knows I don't really want. He's not fed. Okay. His feelings are fragile, so I try to be kind and tell him this is a process while not being responsible for his feelings. I think he's shocked at how strong I am. He notes it. Finally, and I think this is the crux of my question, I feel like the focus is on his, the abuser's, needs, still not being met by the victim's, my, actions. Same story as ever, different and bigger details. I feel he is expecting me to heal him, to make up for what I did. Although he's not directly pressuring me, only what feels like indirectly, to tell him what he wants to hear or to be intimate, He's putting the hard sell on those things as things he needs. I tell him I can't be inauthentic that way and that I have PTSD. So let me ask this part in a rather childish way that I imagine a lot of people might feel. After all he did to me, after how broken I became because of him, know that I own my codependent role in all of this and that I didn't value myself enough to not let myself be treated this way. Why am I now in this place of feeling like I have to heal him from the affair I had? Affairs destroy people, and yet I was already destroyed. I should not have acted in an immoral way, and I'm truly sorry, but that does not change all that I went through and how it altered my brain. I just feel guilty for not wanting to set out on this fresh start with him. Are there any subtle forms of control in all of this? Am I wrong for not being more grateful and or wanting this? The work he's done is not to be disrespected. I just wish I felt like he were doing it more for himself. I have and have had a very full life. He has the opposite. Thank you. All right, Marla, I can help you with this. Yeah, so you lived with an alcoholic who was either an active drinker or maybe a dry drunk for a while, if he was still emotionally abusing you. I don't quite get the timeline. I know it was 20 years. You were getting emotional abused. He's been in recovery almost a decade now. So whatever you mean by recovery, I'm not sure. But if he was in recovery and still emotionally abusing you, that's why I'm not sure. That doesn't sound like recovery. I totally get. I understand, as few others can, how alcoholism doesn't just like resolve in a day. And it's not really just the drinking. It's all the stuff under it and all the dysfunctional patterns that can linger and that some people never get over with. Although I have seen people become somebody even more fulfilled, more kind than they ever were before the drinking got bad. So anything is possible. But you don't tell me very much about his alcoholism, and that's fine, because it's his thing. But what's interesting to me is you keep calling yourself codependent, and I don't see any evidence of that in the letter exactly. My definition of codependent, maybe you're using it to mean that you were in a relationship with an alcoholic, and I think that's an old school thing that codependent, it's one of those terms that can be whatever people want it to be. But I'll tell you how I use it. It's when you invest all your hopes in another person changing so that you can be happy. Now, I'm not hearing that in your letter. I feel like you've sort of written off that you're going to be happy. You are not holding hope. I don't see evidence of codependence. So I'm guessing that you've been connected to some kind of therapy or something where they use that very loosely as somebody who's in a relationship with an alcoholic. Now, personally, having been in relationships with alcoholics, having been raised by them, siblings to them, there's so many different flavors of ways that a person can be adapted or maladapted to having an alcoholic in their life. And being codependent is just one of them. There's all kinds of, archetypes, if you will. And so I don't know. You're not giving me very much insight about you, but here's what I can see, and I'm going to focus on you. You're saying, is there subtle control in this? This sounds like somebody else's question for you. No, I'm not hearing control in this at all. I'm hearing pretty typical struggles and emotional pain about a marriage falling apart and an affair having happened and years of alcoholism and verbal abuse. Like, it sounds pretty consistent with how that would feel, but I wouldn't call it control necessarily. There may be pieces, I don't know. And then you're saying, am I wrong for not being more grateful or not wanting this after all I've been through and how it has altered me? And I don't know, this sounds all like narrative. I don't believe that, I ought to be more grateful. It's like either you're grateful or you're not. Gratitude, some people try to make themselves feel grateful, or they compare themselves to other people who have had it worse and go, I should be grateful. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the way I experience gratitude is as a natural bubbling up of this very good feeling of appreciating what I have, often in the middle of times that are difficult, but have a roof over my head, but have a friend or two, but have my health, or, there's gratitude is a natural feeling that comes when I don't have so much fear and resentment. Now, in this letter, you haven't mentioned at all my healing method, which is so centered on the daily practice where we address and become free of our fearful and resentful thoughts. And I would just really encourage you to give this a try, because you sound confused. I mean, you're writing because you're confused. You have a lot of resentment, which I understand, but you don't want to be driven by it. And you probably have fear. You have fear you're doing the wrong thing here. And, all the guilt you're talking about, it's resentment itself. This stuff needs to be cleared up. It needs to be cleared up. And so here in my healing method, we have a very straightforward, honest way of just sort of facing, these are what my anxious thoughts and feelings are. These are what my resentful ones are. And we don't worry too much about whether it's a feeling that we should have or ought to have or shouldn't have. We don't worry about it. We just name them. We just name what's going on here and here, head and heart. What are we feeling about this? And it's usually a jumble. It's full of trivial stuff. It's chaotic. It's inconsistent, right? And that's okay. You get it on paper. You ask for it to be removed, and then you use this simple form of meditation. And if anybody's thinking, hey, I want to try that, you can. It's all in my book, Re-Regulated. It's also in my free course, The Daily Practice. And I would love it if you came and tried it. But you should learn it before you do it, because if you do it wrong and just kind of like, I think one thing that people do sometimes is they just hear, oh, I write everything that's fearful and resentful, and they do a big written rant, which will in fact make you feel worse. So this is a specific technique. I encourage you to check that out because you sound jumbled, which is normal. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying this is where I see you are. So then you said, and you sort of, I think you're wanting my permission to leave, and you don't need my permission. Am I wrong to not be grateful? Am I wrong to want this after all I've been through and how it's altered me? Yeah, emotional abuse is horrible. And I have no cookie cutter answer for you about whether you should stay and give it a try or leave. So just trust. I don't have a dog in the fight here. I can understand how after what you've been through, you don't want to do it anymore. But then what I hear you doing is sort of trying to bypass that you also did something here. Now, I suppose when you're saying I was codependent, you haven't explained to me how, but I know in every relationship with somebody who's an alcoholic, it's never like a saint and a terrible person. We're all kind of messed up. And whatever has you in a relationship with somebody who's abusing you tells me there's issues there. You're not just a victim. You're somebody who's acting out in some way that is harmful to yourself. And, we can assume not healthy for your kids, probably has effects on other people in your life and on the outcome of things like money and work. And so, we're all flawed people in this. So as somebody who's been through this kind of relationship before, I can just tell you, with great love and acceptance, of course you have a part in all of this. You didn't make him drink, you didn't make him abuse you, but there's something going on with you that makes you fit with such a person. And this is your chance to look at that. So I also hear you kind of rationalizing your affair. And if you are into somebody else and you don't like your marriage anymore, the right thing to do is to end your marriage and take a period of time to heal and recover and then see if you want to have another relationship. All right, we've defined the right things. Does everybody do the right thing? No, they don't. But if you feel guilty, that's why. You did something that was transgressive. You didn't tell me anything about the person you had an affair with. I hope they didn't have a relationship that they were undermining, and you participated in undermining each other's relationship. So it's kind of one of those, I totally understand, but two wrongs don't make a right. Just because he's been awful doesn't mean that secrecy and undermining is the right way for you to go about finding your happiness. So maybe, and you also didn't say whether this relationship was still going on or not. I don't know. I don't know where it is. The fact that you sort of avoided all that is a little bit telling to me that you're not really dealing with it. And so what your husband is doing, I can't really speak for him and he didn't write for me, but if I were to guess, when he cannot get over his resentment at the guy that you had an affair with, but says he has nothing against you, I would speculate that he has conflicted feelings about all of it. And right now for him, it feels safe to resent this other guy. And it doesn't feel safe for him to resent you because he's really scared he's going to lose the marriage. And he's decided he needs to forgive you. And he can't really compartmentalize that perfectly. Who could, right? Who could? I'm sorry for him. It sounds like he let his behavior go on a long time. And if the marriage falls apart, it's very understandable. And if he goes to AA, he'll be in good company with many people who have been through the same thing. And the whole 12-step program and the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous has tremendous wisdom about how to handle these things. So I don't know if he's doing that. I don't know if he's doing that. And you didn't say anything about possibly going to a 12-step program yourself, because you say you come from an alcoholic family system. You married an alcoholic. You're now going through a lot of turmoil because of, an alcoholic who's sober or in recovery. I don't know, what specifically you mean by that, but, it's all of it. It's affecting you terribly. Have you considered going to Al-Anon for families of alcoholics? I found it incredibly helpful. A lot of what I teach in Crappy Childhood Fairy, I learned from being friends with all these people who were having alcoholism-related problems, other people's alcoholism, and then recovering in my presence, and I would hear what they said. I heard some people recover, I heard some people get stuck, and I learned a lot. I was listening and paying attention. How do people get better? So that's a lot what I teach here is, I don't teach the 12 steps, but I teach the culture and the strategies and the way of looking at things from that program and some other influences of mine, some philosophies. And I really encourage you to try it. It's free. I think that one of the wonderful things about the 12-step program is it starts out with the serenity prayer, about knowing the difference between what you can control and what you can't. And I hear you having a lot of confusion about that. And what I loved about it is it gave me this gentle, practical, effective way to deal with the things that I had done that I felt ashamed of. And I needed to face those things so that I could apologize, make restitution, stop, put it behind me, whatever needed to be done about that. And I feel really good about the changes I was able to make. And honestly, I had never found such a practical and honest path to handle that kind of mistake. So I recommend that to you. Okay, here's another thing, and I think you may be the first woman I heard this from, but we hear this from men sometimes who have had an affair. My spouse was extremely grateful to know about it, and I'm just like, oh, that's, I wouldn't say extremely. Maybe that's the silver lining, but they're not grateful. They're devastated. This is painful. Even alcoholics, if you buy into the idea of alcoholism, people are powerless over it. It doesn't mean we accept mistreatment from them, but it explains a lot about how they can simultaneously have done awful things and still want to be loved and still want to find comfort in their spouse. Like they're human, like everybody else. Like we all want that love, and many of us can't control our behavior. Now, I have CPTSD. You might too. So a lot of what I do, and especially what I did when I was unhealed, looks like alcoholism. It's inconsiderate, it's unreliable, it's dishonest, it's not really taking responsibility for my side of things. And so when you can kind of, scan your being for where am I making a mistake? Where am I falling short from my values? You're going to find so much more power than you are trying to think about him and what he's done and what he wants and whether that's fair. And whether you want to stay, which is an important question. I'll tell you flat out, you just sound to me like somebody who needs to be separated for a bit and cooling your jets. That's what I would do if I were in your shoes, is not live together, but not be in another relationship, and being very, very active in my own recovery to get perspective on my part, what I really want, and whether any of this still belongs in my life. So I know you had fallen out of love. That's, that may be the deal killer right there for getting back together, but that doesn't mean that you can't proceed in a loving manner to separate. I don't blame you for being resentful, but I hear a lot of resentment at him. Like, how could he even expect anything from you after what he's done? It's like, well, because everybody does. They're human. They're human. Maybe you think he's not contrite enough. Maybe you feel like he's too focused on him. You might be right. You might be right. But all of this stuff is sort of human foibles. It's what they do. You don't have to tolerate it. You don't have to stay. But it may help you get out of the sort of that spinning coin of like guilt, resentment about it. You sound like two people who are going through it in a fairly, in the way that these things go. It's just painful. And when you've been with somebody for 20 years, there's going to be sadness about it ending. And he wants to try to heal the marriage, and he wants to date you again. That sounds like he was following advice. That's often the advice after infidelity, is like try to show up and be the person that you weren't before, that was missing, that sort of caused everything to fall apart. So if you have any doubt about whether leaving is the right thing, a separation could be a good way to get some perspective on it. And that way you haven't torn everything apart. So I'm just saying that's an option for you. You've been to couples therapy, you've listened to each other, even the hard stuff, served as each other's counselors. Yeah, well, when you're married, of course you're going to do that. But something's off. And you say he's obsessed with anger over what my affair partner did to him. You know what? It's fair. It is fair. It's okay. Even though he was screwed up, even though he was a jerk, his feelings are his feelings. It would be a tall order. Just because your equation is, he was treating me so bad, what right has he to feel bad about how I treated him? It just doesn't work like that. Our hearts feel the way they feel. I'm caught up in a codependent situation where I feel guilty for all the work he's doing to hang on to me when I don't think I want it, but he won't really let me go either. So you don't need him to let you go. You can leave. And, codependent is like, well, he's not letting me. It's not up to him whether you leave or not. You're a free person and you can leave. What some people do while they live in separation is they continue in couples counseling. I don't know, a lot of people find couples counseling is just sort of like exacerbates the fighting. So it's not a sure thing. You definitely want to shop around. As far as couple stuff goes, I think the Gottman method is the most sturdy and, real about how to have a kind conversation with people. It's a lot about how you handle conflict, and it gives you practical tools for how you can navigate when you're in the middle of that point that has always turned into a fight before, about how to hear the other person instead. And even if where you're destined is to break up, if you can break up with goodwill and with completion in yourself and no guilt, but a feeling of clarity that this is what you need to do, even as you feel sorry for the, what has been and what is lost, you can do that. And if your guilt is because somewhere in there you feel like this is the right thing, in separation, you also have the opportunity to repair. And so I just don't think that marriages are black and white, when they're ending. They can end well or they can end badly. And so even if it's going to end, it can end well. And what you do to end well also makes it possible for you to have insight about it, just in case what you really want is to stick around and persevere. So that's all options on the table. No judgment either way. So you did leave me with this one question: why am I now in this place of feeling like I have to heal him from the affair I had? So I want to make it clear to you, we don't heal each other. We heal ourselves. I am somebody who believes in God. My healing is between me and God. I can make amends with other people. I can apologize. I can hear what they have to say, and sometimes we work things out. But you cannot heal him. That is grandiosity, if strictly speaking. And this is something Al-Anon really teaches beautifully, is what it means to be lovingly detached from other people's problems. And they use this metaphor of a drunk spouse who comes home and falls asleep on the staircase. And when you have no compassion, you just leave them there. And when you're codependent, or you're, over solving, trying to fix their problems for them, so to speak, you drag them up into bed and put their pajamas on. A loving detachment means you don't drag them to bed, but you go put a blanket over them. It's a metaphor. But just to show you, there's a middle ground of how you can be kind to somebody who's struggling without trying to fix their problems. I think the guilt is because you lied. And even if you're with, somebody who's failing as your husband, lying is lying. So Marla, all options are on the table, but I would like to encourage you to get clearer about what does codependence mean, and see if that's really a factor for you, or if this is something that you need to clear up on a lot of other levels. So my free download, The Signs That You're in a Codependent Relationship, is right here. You can click on it and have your own copy right now, and I will see you very soon.